The first thing we need to address this week is that my face is peeling on this video. Need to put that elephant in the middle of the room. All right, I can move on now. I committed to doing a YouTube video a week and I missed last week, so I owe you two this week. And then my face started peeling and I got a whole new excuse to avoid it, but the show must go on. So I work in, if you saw my first two videos, I work in a online community of digital entrepreneurs and business owners. I work with both men and women in a community and also on a one-on-one basis with private clients. Last week, I had a great conversation with a guy who works operations in my community, in the community that I work in. And it was funny. This happens often, right? I have all kinds of conversations of internal bottlenecks people are facing that I kind of help them get clarity and healing or whatever terminology you want to use for it. Anything that's kind of holding them back on an intangible or subconscious level. And this manifests a million different kinds of ways, stress and anxiety, balancing personal and professional life, fear of failure, self-doubt, lacking purpose or lacking clarity with purpose, lacking fulfillment in a specific area of life or all of them, can't get yourself to do something you know you need to do, decision-making dilemmas, setbacks, motivation and inspiration, lacking health, or there's also a lot of things in blind spots a lot of the time that don't really get identified till we walk through a conversation together. And I kind of serve as that external filter for your thoughts. And we kind of just get to dump out everything and let it be messy and just let it be what it needs to be. And then we kind of sort through it together. I'm really good at that. But what also happens a lot of the time is I'll talk to people who are working through or need to work through things that I worked through myself. And life and growth isn't linear, right? So sometimes it'll be an old lesson that I need a good reminder of, or something that was in a blind spot of mine, or something I haven't been keeping at the forefront of my consciousness lately, that it really helped me to remember. And I always have this moment after these calls where I'm kind of checking with myself and I'm like, am I practicing what I just preached? Am I embodying the lesson that we just talked about on this call? Did I just have something reflected back to me that I could use a reminder on or work on clarity on? Because I'm a human too, right? When people are in any sort of role, guide, coach, conseiller, vizier, teacher, there's this funny dehumanization that can happen sometimes. It's not really prevalent in my work, but it can happen, right? You assume that people in these positions of leadership are perfect and have every single duck you can imagine in a row. And that's not true. And of course, there's a certain baseline you should expect from people helping you in certain areas, but everyone's human. We all have our shit. Anyways, last week, this specific call I'm thinking of was about this person has worked with a lot of notable people. And the version of them from the past, from years ago, like pre-pandemic, really capitalized on that. Was very clout chasing, very clout hungry, loved flexing their status, big ego, right? And they're not really like that anymore. And they're self-aware enough to know that they like attention and that, they do like credit for things, but they don't want to share these pieces of social proof that would help them with their offer well, because they don't want to be that person who needs that. They don't want to have to be the person who needs to flex those things. And it's funny because this is a lesson I have struggled with a ton on my journey as well. And it dates back a lot. And it was something that slipped from the forefront of my consciousness a little bit. And so I had one of those moments after the call and I just laughed. If you've ever heard of the term pronoia, it's the positive version of paranoia. And I'm very much pronoid. That's a word where I always feel like the conversations and things that are put in my path are just designed for my growth and for my benefit, even when they're a little painful. And we talked about this ego concept, right? Because when you're worried about showing things that would benefit you because you don't want to be the kind of person who shows those things, essentially you're avoiding taking up space in a certain way. You are not really avoiding egotistical games. When we think of operating out of ego, we tend to usually assume it implies one standard definition of ego and that it's always negative. Like the guy who flashes his luxury car, like his Maserati or his Bentley or whatever the best cars are, or their Rolex, or, oh yeah, look at me, I'm so cool, blah, 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 blah. We think of that version of ego. But like everything, yin doesn't exist without yang. And on the other end of the spectrum of ego, there's the kind of ego that's, instead of saying, I need to show this off so that I can feel worthy, it's, I need to hide this so I can feel worthy. I need to hide this, or I'm the kind of person who needs to show off. In reality, a healthy ego doesn't need either thing, right? You're still needing something to validate your sense of self-worth. But instead of needing to show off to validate your sense of self-worth, you're needing to hide to validate your sense of self-worth. This is a common end of the spectrum of ego and cope that I'm familiar with from creative and artist circles, which ties back to my roots. I was a very creative kid, always been the creative type, all over the place. Through an art show in Tampa once, I will share about that. I need to share the video from that show. Lots of art stuff I could go into, but artists struggle with this, right? Like the cliche old trope of I don't want to sell out, or promoting my art and being seen for it and collecting notoriety for it and making money from it is just selling out and it's cheapening the product. And on some level, that's fair. If you think of like singers and actors who go down a bad path and they have managers and people who take control of their creativity and their talent in ways that kind of dishonor their work and their creative expression and their freedom, it does get cheapened in a lot of those scenarios. People need what's predictably going to print cash, right? As fans of musicians, for example, we can get so disappointed when an artist decides to come out with a new album we've been eagerly anticipating, and it's a totally different style than the style we fell in love with. But that is dehumanizing too, right? We've relied on them for this creative expression that we loved and that resonated with us. And we forget that they're a creative person, and the nature of creativity is exploratory and volatile and chaotic in some way, and it changes and it's not linear. But it's also human nature to kind of resent that uncertainty and that lack of predictability. And it's not always maliciously intended, but we tend to be like, what the hell? Like, I was counting on you and I was so excited for this, and it's not what I wanted it to be. And at the same time, in other contexts, we can be like, damn, this is the same old thing over and over. I'm so bored. Like if, the person who makes your meals every night just always made bland chicken and rice. And I'm not talking shit about chicken and rice, but you get the point. It depends. And like, we talked through it and ended up sharing pieces of myself. And it reminded me of my thing, because I've also had that issue where I've had this shame surrounding taking credit for things. And it ties back to a lot of really shitty examples of status seeking and attention seeking that I grew up around, that was attached to a lot of dishonorable characters, malicious intent, straight up lameness. And at the root of that is a lack of self-trust, right? Because it doesn't really make sense to not share in the name of creative expression or because it would serve your, personal brand or business or offer or whatever it is best in terms of positioning and self-promotion. At the root of it is a lack of self-trust and is downstream of self-worth. Because if you're going to show up to that space where people share their things and they self-promote and they put things out into the world for other people to see and get influenced by, you're pretty much doing both yourself and everyone else a disservice by not sharing those things and taking up space from a pure place. And by definition, you come from a pure place if you crave the work more than you crave the attention. Whereas the people that you fear being like crave the attention more than they crave the work. And you're letting the people get exposed to those people who are going to take up space regardless. You're letting them get influenced by those kinds of characters when you kind of almost have a responsibility to take up space and let people be influenced by things with better intentions at the root of them, right? And we get into all sorts of depths with that topic, but I think it's a really important lesson for us to kind of reframe with, because we're living in like the most superficial time ever. We have social media. They just came out with a new platform with Threads, which is like Instagram and Twitter had a baby. I'm not into it. I'm not into TikTok either. I'm already spread pretty thin between Slack, Twitter, now YouTube, and trying to get back on my Substack. Maybe that'll change, but right now I'm focused on those. And I mean, you see it in the younger generation. Everyone is born onto a stage. Like social media really changed everything. We have artificial intelligence stepping onto the scene. We have Photoshop. And I think that all of it's great, right? It's like when the internet came. There were a lot of concerns about the internet when it came onto the scene, similar to the concerns I had when AI first started stepping onto the scene. And it's funny, my friend Alexander Cortez, who's on Twitter, we should definitely follow him. I think he was the one who posted something about how Plato criticized paper when it was invented as a threat to memory, because you're going to be able to write things down. And it's nuanced, right? Like every time there's a groundbreaking new technology, there's a lot of fear that gets boiled up with it about what it's going to betray in terms of human evolution. But there's also a lot of power and convenience that comes with it. So it's just finding the balance. As with anything, there's always a point of diminishing return that we're always tempted by, because as humans, we like to pick the path of least resistance, which is usually where things get shitty. But circling back to my point of this most superficial time, I think that even though there's a lot of superficiality that's going to be encouraged with things like AI and Photoshop and social media, it also brings the other end of the spectrum, right? It brings that craving for realness and authenticity and rawness and human connection. And when artificial intelligence can handle all of the thinking, what are we going to do with the human thinking? When Photoshop can make all of your pictures look exactly how you want to look, what are you going to do with the real way you look in real life? When you can create this perfect personal brand and portrayal of who you are online, what are you going to do with the real person, self-image you have in reality and as a human? And I'm well aware of the dissonance that gets created with people who have a lack of harmony and misalignment between those two things, which I've definitely had my own versions of struggle with. But I've more struggled with being a little bit too off. This is going to sound so silly, but too freely expressing to the point of my demise, like to the point of sacrificing positioning and the best representations of myself that I can. I'll get into that in another video. Bug. And I don't mean to suggest that I'm nuanced with everything, right? Like I don't mean to suggest that you need to perfectly align your social media presence and your real life presence, for example. In fact, I very much believe that you should keep some things sacred um, that you don't share and you don't talk about, and you don't get into the habit of experiencing beautiful moments or beautiful views and needing to take a picture of them all. I'm big on both. I'm big on minding the balance. I'm big on taking as many pictures as you can and taking as many notes and journal entries and documenting everything as much as you can and sharing your life on personal media as a personal brand on social media. I'm a big advocate for those things. I'm also a big advocate of being able to appreciate a view without feeling like you missed out because you didn't take a picture, or having a conversation with really profound words happening and not writing them down and letting them kind of be forgotten, but remembering that feeling and not feeling like you lost anything. And I think that the tension between those two things is where people really struggle. And it's the most important thing to me. Um, it's like the different areas of your life. The most fulfilling life is a never ending balancing act. You can live healthy with free time, and you can also be ambitious and hardworking when it's time to work. It's not about one or the other. You can share the things that would position you better online and, show what high status people you've worked with to support your social proof or whatever. And you also don't need to be the person who's flexing everything and over worrying about positioning and over worrying about self-image. And I think it's a lot harder to live between those two tensions. I think it's a lot easier to drift to extremes. But I'm a huge, huge advocate for that space and the nuance. And now that word is starting to feel so cliche now that I use that for my online identity or whatever. But yeah, I think that's all I have for today. Sorry for the peeling face. I've been getting a lot of sun. And I'm very well hydrated and everything like that. So I don't really understand why this is happening, but show must go on. Hope everyone has a beautiful week. And yeah, I'm enjoying being on the coast in Portugal at the moment. It's kind of cool. My first 3 videos have each taken place in a different country. First Italy, then London, and now Portugal. Wonder where I'll film from next. Probably from Portugal. It's been a great summer abroad. It really, really has. There's something so different about, I was very fortunate to travel a lot growing up as a kid. And then I studied abroad in college, which was also really fortunate. But it's so different being out here for a third of the year as an adult grown woman, making your own decisions and navigating your own way around. I'm really savoring it. And I'm in a really good place. And I just want everybody to get to this place with themselves. I'm not really good at teaching people how to be me, but I am good at guiding you through what it means to be you. And it's so cliche, but I live in between the two tensions, right? Like that spiritual, woo-woo creative, and also the ambitious, firm grounded, like business world. And I like living between those two tensions. I love it. Otherwise I would pick one or the other. I really, really believe in here. And sometimes I lose sight of that when insecurities boil up or I haven't been keeping to my health practices or whatever. But really, this is my ideal place. And it's nice because I can kind of bridge the gap between those two, right? Like if you lean more towards that chaotic, creative side, I can help bring you close to the other side. And if you lean more towards that business ambitious, not taking care of yourself, too worried about materialism, I can bring you closer to the other side. And it's always this balancing act that I help people with, essentially. Clarity, balance, and all the different areas of your life that kind of keep that intact and keep us fulfilled and keep us chasing some sort of North Star or goal or fulfillment, because that's what it's all about. It's kind of being perpetually unsatisfied in a way that keeps us moving forward, but just fulfilled enough to really enjoy and savor where we are. So I'm going to stop rambling now and finish this video. Much love. Follow me on Twitter at Trina Nuance, and have a beautiful Tuesday.